All right, only three major party presidential nominees in American history have not been straight, white, Christian men. They were Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris. All three Democrats. And, of course, two of them were candidates that lost to Donald J. Trump. Now, some Democrats reportedly want to reverse course. They want to go after. They want a straight, white, Christian male to be their nominee in 2028. The only person that can give us fair reaction to this, ESPN's First Take podcast star, friend of the show, Stephen A. Smith. By the way, first of all, my first observation, wasn't Tim Walz picked because he was going to relate to dudes and men and be the masculine candidate on the ticket? That's number one. And how much crap...
I hope you're not attributing something like that to me. I certainly never said. I can tell you that much. That's number one. Number two, I was on the record on this show telling you the selection should have been Josh Shapiro. She made a huge mistake by not picking the Pennsylvania governor as her running candidate. And number three, I'm very impressed. You usually don't wear white shirts. I'm proud of you. You're diversifying your wardrobe. Way to go. About time.
Wait a minute. I got the memo. You did this. What is it like to hang out with me? Promotion for me, and on it, you said I dressed terribly. So I figured you're on the show tonight. I might as well get all dressed up for you. All right. When you were on my podcast, you said your choices for 2028 in order were Josh Shapiro, Wes Moore, one or two, doesn't matter which one, or your third choice over Kamala, over Newsom, over any other Democrat would be Marco Rubio. I need a follow-up. How much crap did you get for that? That went viral.
I'm sure I got crap for it. I mean, a lot of people were coming after me for that. I don't give a damn. I feel what I feel. I say what I say. I mean what I mean. Marco Rubio is the adult in the room. I think he's incredibly qualified. Obviously, he's been a senator for a long time before he became the Secretary of State, and obviously the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States. He knows what he's talking about. He knows Capitol Hill. He knows the people, and he's not running up against somebody like me in all honesty. So because of that, you know what? I think that he would be a prime candidate considering the candidates that the Democrats will roll out there. If it's not somebody like Josh Shapiro, I don't see how it's going to happen because I don't see anybody else in the Democratic Party in line to go up against him.
Why do you think so highly of yourself that you think if you ran, you'd win the nomination? Why do you believe that? It looks like Hillary's going to New Hampshire. It looks like Kamala wants in. Gavin thinks it's his already. What makes you think you'd win?
First of all, I'm not qualified, not by a long shot. I'm speaking about it as an indictment against the Democratic Party, not to big up myself. The fact is it's leaderless, it's rudderless, and it has been that way for a very, very long time because of the things that happened with Joe Biden, because of the lies that were told to protect him and shield him and the Democratic Party from the kind of things that was going on during that administration. It came back to bite them, particularly with the election. We all know this to be true. And since that time, they've been up in flux. You know, the Democrats all over the place recognize the fact that there needs to be somebody capable of stepping up to be a leader. That person has been trying to be a Gavin Newsom, who's decided that governing something else needed to be just as much, if not more of a priority, and that's trolling Trump and trying to beat Trump in his own game. I don't believe that's going to work. A guy like Bashir out of Kentucky, could he resonate? That's a legitimate question mark right there. I think the person that could potentially resonate is Josh Shapiro, but he's got some things going up against it because, as you articulated and lamented on many, many occasions, you have an abundance of people out there that are engaging in anti-Semitism, whether it's with their rhetoric and simply that, or with their actions, or the combination of both. And him being Jewish obviously could be problematic for him if he was running for the presidency of the United States of America. I still think he's very qualified. I think he's done a good job with the state of Pennsylvania, and I think he's somebody that should be strongly considered.
That speaks volumes about the Democratic Party, doesn't it? That, you know, there's such a strain of virulent anti-Semitism. All right, let me move on. I've always been a fan of Tiger Woods, one of the greatest golfers of all time, if not the. Added another entry to his long list of motor vehicle accidents last week. A lot of people asking a simple question: why doesn't Tiger have a driver? By the way, I don't have a problem with the fact that Tiger, with all the injuries he's had, all the back operations and the accident that nearly, ended up with him not walking again. I have no doubt he has chronic pain issues and medical issues that he has to deal with that requires strong medication. However, according to People magazine, he's a private person, doesn't want anyone knowing where he is, what he's doing. Apparently he likes to stay home rather than go out in public anyway. Okay, if he's going to go out, why doesn't he have a driver? That's the part that makes no sense to me.
Well, it's also the part that's unforgivable. See, we can have compassion for him when you look at the fact that he's had chronic back. I remember in a 3-year period, Sean, he had like 4 back surgeries between 2014 and 2017. And since that time, immediately in the aftermath of that was just a few weeks after he had spinal fusion surgery was when he got into that accident in 2017 when they saw, not an accident, they saw him on the side of the road asleep at the wheel in 2017, and he seemed a bit inebriated and not himself. Since that time, we learned he's been on Vicodin, he's been on Dilaudid, he's been on Xanax, he's been on Ambien, he's been on THC. These are opioid drugs, sleep aids, anti-anxiety. All of this stuff has been going on. So there's no doubt that he's going through it. There's a part of you that feels very, very sorry for him because we know, and me covering the world of sports, I know plenty of people who have been addicted to pain medications, no doubt about it. Where the sympathy goes out the window is that this is the 3rd time he's been caught behind the wheel of a car, a motor vehicle, while he's been inebriated. And this is a billionaire. It's safe to say he can afford car service. And if your privacy is that important, I got news for you. I use car service from time to time. I don't have to worry about my privacy being violated because I'm in a car service. That makes no sense whatsoever. But if he wants to act like that makes sense, then the question would beg, are you that private that you don't want to take a car service, or do you have something to hide? Because we know he's been in trouble in the past with stuff that he didn't want the public to know about. So these are the kind of things that allow folks to revisit the kind of troubled life that he has had over the last decade plus. He's had a plethora of injuries. We know that. There is no doubt about it that he's in a lot of pain. You're not on these kind of drugs unless that is the case. But nobody gives a damn if you get behind the wheel of a car and you kill somebody. And he's lucky that that hasn't happened. When he had the accident in Los Angeles in 2021, where he hit a tree and tumbled over, he almost killed himself. Okay, this time around, again, he hits another vehicle that had a wagon behind it. All right, luckily nobody was hurt. What's it going to take? That's really the issue involving Tiger Woods. And that's where sympathy is going out the window because there's no excuse to get behind the wheel of a vehicle
my understanding is the
you're taking
incident,
these kind of drugs.
When he was driving to the tournament, that he was speeding and he was late, which is different than whether he's driving under the influence. I think 2 separate issues, no?
Well, they weren't separate issues because when he got in trouble in 2021, he was driving like 85 in a 40-mile-per-hour zone. And it was, and people suspected that he was under the influence. The problem with that is that there was no blood or alcohol tests that were rendered at that particular moment in time. This go round, they did give him the breathalyzer test or whatever, the alcohol test, but obviously he refused to give a urine sample, which was legal for them to request. So that's the issue that you have right now. But in the end, each time, whether he was speeding or not, and he found himself in a motor vehicle accident, he is believed to have been inebriated while behind the wheel of a motor vehicle. So what's it going to take? You're going to have to kill somebody before you learn your lesson? I sincerely hope it doesn't come to that because any kind of break that he's been receiving all of these years will go right out the window the second he does that kind of harm to another human being. He better watch himself. Get yourself the help that you need. And at the very least, do get a driver. Do not get behind the wheel of a motor vehicle when you know you're taking all of these drugs.
He's got to get help, is my observation. I hope he does.
Absolutely.
And you're right, before he hurts himself or somebody else. Stephen, I appreciate you as always. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.